Greetings, I hope this video finds you well. And tonight is Maundy, Thursday. And our text for this evening is John chapter 13, verses 1 through 17 and 31 through 35. Now before the festival of the Passover, Jesus knew that his hour had come to depart from this world and to go to the Father. Having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. The devil had already put into the heart of Judas, son of Simon Iscariot, to betray him. And during supper, Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands, and that he had come from God and was going to God, got up from the table, took off his outer robe, and tied a towel around himself. Then he poured water into a basin, and began to wash the disciples' feet, and to wipe them with a towel that was tied around him. He came to Simon Peter, who said to him, "Lord, are you going to wash my feet?" Jesus answered, "You do not know now what I am doing, but later you will understand." Peter said to him, "You will never wash my feet." Jesus answered, "Unless I wash you, you will have no share with me." Simon Peter said to him, "Lord, not my feet, but also my hands and my head." Jesus said to him, "One who has bathed does not need to wash except for the feet, but is entirely clean. And you are clean, though not all of you." For he knew who was betraying him. For this reason he said, "Not all of you are clean." After he had washed their feet and put on his robe and had returned to the table, he said to them, "Do you know what I have done to you? You call me teacher and Lord, and you are right, for that is what I am. So if I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I have set you an example that you also should do as I have done to you. Very truly I tell you, servants are not greater than their master, nor are messengers greater than the one who sent them. If you know these things, you are blessed if you do them. Now the Son of Man has been glorified, and God has been glorified in him. If God has been glorified in him, God will also glorify him in himself, and will glorify him at once. Little children, I am with you only a little longer. You will look for me. And as I said to the Jews, so now I say to you, where I am going, you cannot come. I give you a new commandment, that you love one another, just as I have loved you. You should also love one another. By this everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another. The gospel of our Lord. So, those of you who know me know that I do not like foot washing. It's not my favorite thing in worship services. It's actually something I kind of loathe. It's not the act itself, because I get the symbolism of it, but I've just had bad experiences with it. Had some creepy foot washing experiences. Not really for me, because nobody wants to go near my feet, but for my wife Patrice, that was kind of what ultimately fully turned me off, was when she kind of got handled by somebody while doing a foot washing, and it just, ever since then, nope, not my thing, and so I don't like to do it. Now, I get it. I get what the symbolism of it is. I get why it was done in this text. Back in the first century, foot washing was a very important thing for cleanliness, to make sure that people are staying clean and staying healthy. You get a lot of infections in the feet, especially when you don't have some fancy footwear like we have nowadays, when most people are going around barefoot or in sandals. So people's feet was more likely to get extremely dirty, and therefore have infections and track mud around their nice clean houses, that kind of thing. So the idea of foot washing was not a pretty thing for people to have to do, but especially if you were a wealthy man, you had a servant do it for you. So to have Jesus be that servant is a very symbolic act of doing that foot washing for someone, and treating the disciples as if they are these rich men and their teacher is the one who is serving them. I get what that is. And I also understand that a lot of really cool ministries of the church have come out of the idea of foot washing. In Oregon, there was a wonderful ministry where people would go out to the homeless camps and wash feet. I don't know if it's still going on, but it was a big thing back in the 90s, early 2000s. And the idea is that a lot of these homeless people were not able to get the proper care for their feet. They had bad shoes, they had bad socks, all this kind of stuff. So going out there and doing these foot washings for them was very hygienic and helping bring down medical costs that would in turn not only put people in debt, but it would also, because these people were homeless and couldn't afford it, it would actually help with their medical costs that would usually be turned over to taxpayers. So it was and it would help them, most importantly. So it's a very powerful ministry. It's a really wonderful thing for people to do, and it's a very humbling thing for people to do, because not many people want to be out there washing people's feet. In Madison, I came across a group of people who had some medical training that were helping care for the homeless people in Madison, and just to care right there on the streets, that was also based on this ministry and this idea of, yes, these people can't afford medical care, so what can we do to prevent them from becoming unhealthy, prevent them from having to visit emergency rooms, and bring on more costs, and also to keep them healthy. And it was a really neat little ministry that I saw enacted on State Street, where a couple of young men were getting some sores taken care of that they had on their bodies that just had to become infected. And I found out that this is a very widespread thing here in the Madison area. And so I get why people like it. I just wish I could be creative enough to come up with a different idea within a worship setting for us to perform the ritual of the servant leadership manifestation, so that I might be a little more comfortable with it. And maybe that's the point. Maybe I just need to suck it up and not be comfortable with it. And that's because it's about this idea of instilling the idea of servant leadership within people. And what servant leadership is based in this idea that you should never ask anybody to do something that you're not willing to do yourself. That you should, as a leader, need to lead by example, to lead through them. And some of the ways that this is done is by, I'll give you an example. My wife, when she took over the job as a co-director in the lab that she works at now, one of the jobs that she had to do before taking over that was to learn every single instrument in the lab and every single test that they did, and had to know how to do them so that if anyone was ever sick, she could fill in for them. A powerful thing that has actually come in very handy for her ever since we've been dealing with this pandemic and having to deal with cut staffs and having to fill in spaces. And that is based on this model of servant leadership, that in order to run this lab in a good way, in a constructive way, the leaders must understand what those underneath them are having to do so that they can better understand what their employees are going through. In the same way, when I first got out of seminary, I had to be both secretary and pastor. So now I have hopefully a better understanding even of what the office administrator has to do, and hopefully better empathize with them. Hopefully Perry isn't driven too insane by what I do, and hopefully I don't drive her too crazy. And I do understand what Dave has to do as our janitor. But thankfully, I do not have to do his job, and I'm sure he's pretty happy he doesn't have to do mine. But servant leadership is that idea of being willing to do it. That idea of being to emphasize and have empathy for those who are below us, and also to have that empathy for those above us. It kind of goes both ways. And understanding and loving them for what they do, and to know that what they do is important and have an understanding of how it connects to that bigger picture, instead of just working from a top down and not really caring how things are done, only if that they get done. And when we are able to be servant leaders, when we're able to actually emphasize and be there with those who we are serving, we are loving them. It is a sign of love to be able to have empathy and understanding for what the people around us go through, what the people around us have to do in order to make our lives better, to make our jobs easier. And that's why we have this wrap up at the end of the text, where Jesus tells us to love one another as he has loved us. It is that go and be servant leaders in your communities. Go and understand, seek that understanding of what people must go through to be a leader, to do the jobs that they have to do. So that when we are trying to work with those people, we can have empathy and understanding of what they are going through. Thank you. Amen. Happy Maundy, Thursday. Go in peace. Serve the Lord.